Afternoon, everyone. We'll call our meeting back to order, and we will continue on our sheet. We were to the judicial branch, and we were about to talk to Stephen Wu. Stephen, welcome committee.
Good afternoon, committee. The first item the committee has to review for the judicial branch is item A. That's the governor's budget amendment regarding the docket fee fund replacement revenue. This would add 7.4 million of SGF and replace that amount from the docket fee fund.
Did we ask the other day about using the federal dollars for this, and or did we determine whether that was?
Yes, Senator Solentrop had asked about the possibility of using federal funds for this purpose. As of today, no specific guidance has been issued regarding this yet, so we don't have a definitive answer yet.
So I guess this would be another deal that we might just have to wait on. See, I mean, I think we probably want to do some funding as far as funding it, but I don't know if we want to wait and look at federal dollars or just go ahead and fund it.
If it is of assistance, sir, the House recommendation was to go ahead and add the funding with the addition of language to lapse the SGF appropriation if federal funds are available for this purpose.
Okay, committee. I think Pat had hers up first. Senator Petty.
So I was going to ask this question, and I think you kind of answered it, because it seems that if we do something similar to the House, that we would have appropriations there that you could lapse. But if we don't appropriate, then I'm not sure if that makes it more difficult than to put in federal funds. And I don't know who can answer that question.
I don't know that it's a big deal either way, because we'll end up in conference and it'll be, you know, if we can use federal dollars, we'll all agree to use federal dollars. If not, I think we'll all agree to use SGF funds. Is there anyone on the committee that's opposed to putting the docket fee 7 million, what was it, Stephen?
7.4 million.
7.4 million in? Is everybody okay with that? I think we are, so I guess we could go either way on this, whatever the committee wants to do. It's, you want to put the same language as the House? I mean, I guess we're all in agreement we want to fund it, so if we're okay, let's go ahead and just, Amy, we'll just go ahead and do that. That's everyone in the committee's good with that. Okay, we'll do that. Thank you, Stephen. And then on the salaries, we're just going to leave all that till conference.
Okay, so maintain the Senate position.
Yep. And then public employees retirement system, that's also you, Stephen.
Yes, sir. This is HB 2405. This is the 500 million in bonds for the Capers pension obligation bonds. This would be, should the committee decide to add funding for the debt service payments for that, the committee can. As a reminder, the bill authorizes the issuance of up to $500 million in bonds at a 4.3% maximum interest rate. The estimated debt service interest payment for that would be approximately 21.6 million for this first year. We don't know the principal payment amount yet and won't know until the bond is issued.
So our options on this too are either fund it later or put an unknown amount in there.
Yes, it's a matter of whether or not you want to appropriate money funding now or at a later point when more information is known. So
committee, you want to mess with this at this time, or just wait until we know what the costs are? I mean, we've all agreed and we've passed it and the governor signed it. It's law. We're going to have to fund the bonds. So it's a matter of, did the House put money in theirs, or?
The House has not addressed this item yet. And if it is of help, you can also fund it in two portions. You can pay for the interest portion now and the principal portion at a later date.
What's Senator Solentrop?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we're either going to fund that or we're going to fund the Capers payment. So it doesn't really make a lot of difference. I think we need to go ahead with the bonding, and we'll pay the appropriate principal and interest at that time based on the amortization. So it's not like we're not going to be paying one or the other, so.
Exactly. We've already agreed to it. It's just we don't know the exact amounts, and that was so. You want to just put language in that,
According to the amortization agreed upon a $500 million bond, that we would agree to pay the principal and interest accordingly.
committee, is that, everybody's good with that? Amy? Jill?
I'm sorry, sir, could you please clarify that? Because generally, we put an amount in, and then we say it's interest, we put an amount in, we say it's interest and debt service, or we just wait, because Stephen, am I correct that once these get issued, then, like, at the beginning of next session, this would be in a supplemental from the governor of what we needed to pay for debt service?
That is correct.
So, Jill, you're thinking maybe we should just go ahead and put an amount of money in at this time?
Okay, so I'm trying to reflect it. I don't think we have ever done this in the past of just saying we should make a payment, whatever we do. I think if we do that, we would want to have the state finance council or somebody actually approve what was, or I think in the past, what we have done is we've just waited till the next fiscal year in January when we knew what it was going to be, and then it became part of the supplemental bill.
Senator Salmtrump?
Mr. Chairman, that would be fine, very appropriate. We don't know what the interest rate's going to be, so we don't know what the amortization will be. So if we want to wait to begin that funding until next session, that's fine also.
Committee, Senator Hawk?
Just a procedural question. Do we have to do something as Ways and Means to authorize the issuance of the bonds? Or is that automatically done when the bill was passed and signed?
I can answer that. The bill authorizes issuance of that bond.
We really don't have to do anything.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Senator Petty?
I was just trying to understand from what Jill had said. So if we are going to do anything, and if we're just looking at it as, I shouldn't say just, but if we're looking at it as being part of a supplemental, are you saying it should be a specific amount?
That's what we don't know. We don't know what the costs are at this time, so it was whether we put a chunk of money aside or if we just wait and after hearing, that, wait until next year, then we'd know the amounts. I think we just won't wait.
What's the
No, we're gonna pay it.
21.6 million based on?
Pardon me?
What's the 21.6 million based on?
That's based on the Kansas Development Finance Authority's estimate of what the interest payment would be if bonds were issued for the full 500 million at the maximum interest rate, 4.3%.
So up to?
Right, that's just the interest.
Could I also clarify something, sir?
Jill, please.
Well, I was just going to remind everyone, because the revisor who worked on this reminded me that the State Finance Council will take action to approve the actual bonds. And then, as you've said, sir, they have to meet that interest amount that Stephen gave us. I'm sorry that I can't remember
4.3.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
Okay, committee? We just want to wait and see what the actual costs are? I mean, everything's been authorized and it's going to happen. It's just, well, there's a possibility, I guess, if the interest rate went to 4.5, it wouldn't happen on the bonds, so. Okay, everybody comfortable in waiting? Okay, we'll just wait, Amy. Okay, Stephen? Thank you. Next item we have is the Kansas Public Employees Retirement. Oh, we just did that, excuse me. Board of Indigents Defense Service, Martin DeBoer. Welcome, Martin.
Good afternoon, Chairman Committee. This committee wished to review item A of the Board of Indigent Defense Services, the 2022 enhancement requests. Some of these enhancements were addressed during conference. So during conference, they did add $200,000 for the case management system and $3.9 million to partially address the agency's caseload staffing. And that would include up to 45 FTEs. So that leaves a remainder of $3.9 million for their staffing requests, an additional 49 FTE positions, as well as the $4.1 million, which was originally recommended by the governor for the recruitment and retention for the agency, as well as the $3.6 million for the increased assigned counsel pay.
So in conference, we had approved half of,
Yeah, so in conference, the House brought a position of reallocating the $4.1 million, which the governor had originally set for the recruitment and retention. They took $200,000 for the case management system, and then the $3.9 to partially address the staffing. So the staffing portion is $3.9 million. That's for 26 additional public defenders and up to a total of about 45 FTE positions for support staff.
so we really don't need to do anything on this. This is just more or less information unless we wanted to add additional funding, correct?
That is correct, but one of these, in going back to our previous conversation, is to address the funding portion of the increase of the assigned counsel pay rate up to $100 an hour for fiscal year 2022.
Senator McGinn.
I just checked with staff. So I think this is why Senator Petty picked up on that. It says 0 here. And we actually approved that for that one time because that bill is below the line in the event that that bill doesn't make it through this year. So it adds that 3.6. And it's SGF. You want to know where the funding was coming from. It's SGF.
Correct, but what I'm hearing Martin say, that's not covering the $100 an hour. What's it covering?
Well, my understanding was when you passed the language, that was purely the proviso language to allow them to move it up to $100 an hour. Now, if it was the will of the committee to include the funding for that as well, I can definitely change that, but I understood that it was just a language when we added that language in. So the $3.6 million would be the funding for the proviso to be able to bring it up to $100 an hour.
Yeah. So my intention was to fund and put language in.
All right. So,
Because it doesn't do any good putting language in if you don't have money.
so if that's the will of the committee, I can go ahead and make that change.
Okay, Senator McGinn, so the 3.6 is what we're talking about, correct? Okay.
This needs to
Yeah, be funded. Is everyone amendable to the 3.6 to make sure we have this funded? Anybody against it? Okay. Jill or Amy will add that. Okay. Okay, Martin.
Thank you, committee. That is it for the Board of Indigent Defense Services. Yes.
Senator Hawk.
So did we put the 200,000 in the mega bill for the case management system, or do we need to do that?
No, that is included in House Bill 2007.
Okay. So that's there. And then what about the 3.9 million?
That was also included in House Bill 2007.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Martin, so next we have Healthcare Stabilization Fund, Board of Governors.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. This is to review their merit-based pay raise for the agency in the amount of $33,767, and that was pulled out by the committee to review at omnibus.
Remember why we did that?
So the agency had already included this in their initial request. In their initial salary request, they had a merit-based pay raise of 2.5%. The motion removing the 2.5% for the governor's pay plan also encompassed all the other pay rates. So this pay rate was separately included by the agency.
Now, Were these classified or unclassified or?
I believe these are unclassified, but I can check for that for you. But this is a fee fund. This is from the Healthcare Stabilization Fund. So these are special revenue funds.
So committee, I don't know who might have had questions and concerns on this, but is there any other questions or concerns on this? Senator Hawk?
I guess my concern is, I'm hard pressed, if we're going to give or allow pay raises in places that are not state general fund. I think the reason we put this off was we were going to look at pay raises for everybody, so.
So you're suggesting we leave this go for now?
Well, I'd like to consider this along with the other ones that we said we were going to wait on and discuss in conference with the House.
Senator Clays?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We did set this aside, I think along with one other item that was similar. The State Banking Commission, I think, was the other one that we set aside. And I think one of the questions we asked at the time, Senator McGinn might have asked this or inspired me to ask it, I forget which, but we weren't certain if there were other entities that were not state general fund funded who were also doing this but didn't have that in a budget item, that this was part of the move from classified to unclassified in some agencies. There were a lot of different reasons that these were being offered, these raises, and just getting a handle on, were there really just two entities out there that did this out of the many, many entities that exist? And I think that question still hasn't been answered, and I would like an answer to it. I mean, I think we all might. And I'd be fine putting this off until we get that answer. So I, initially tried to put it back in, but now I think I'd rather understand more fully if there are others out there that are like this but aren't in front of us, so that we can make them all align in how we're treating them, and that one organization isn't being treated differently than the other when it comes to how they structured pay raises for those who went from classified to unclassified.
Committee, are we all okay with that? We'll take this and the State Banking Commission, and if there's any others, we'll do it. Senator McGinn?
So I think we did ask for that. And who do we need to ask, and when will we get the answer? That's my question. Who's going to get us that answer, and when?
Alan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We can reach out to Personnel Services and verify the data that we have already put together. There is a table that showed some of them, and we were actually giving you the list when the original motion was made to delete any salary adjustments in the bill, and so that was kind of like where it was going originally. But we can do some additional inquiries. I mean, if I could clarify the request, I mean, there's things like career progression plans for highway patrol. There's a bunch of other just sort of one-off salary adjustment plans that are in the state right now. So you're looking for all of those various types of plans?
I think either that or just are there more that are similar to these two? That would be helpful to know. I think we all know about the KBI and the KHP plans that weren't really intended to be pulled out. But these seem like they're a little bit different, and there were only two of them. So I think that's the part that's a little confusing, that there would only be two.
Senator McGinn?
I think we could start with, the local, or Transparency and Ethics, reviewed 19 of them that are fee funded. I mean, we could start with those 19, and that would give us an idea as to who's in and who's not.
Certainly.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dylan? Okay, so we'll wait for more information on them too. Thank you.
We'll get it together for you.
Next, we'll move on to Kansas Department of Health and Environment, Division of Health, Megan Leopold. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'll start with item B, which is regarding the 340B drug pricing program. The committee had asked for more information about some of the experiences that the Kansas community health clinics were having with the 340B program. So I believe you've received some testimony that was provided this session to the Bethel Committee as well as the Senate Public Health and Welfare Committees. There was also a question about the language that had been brought up by the House, and there is no formal language that's available yet. The House, I believe, is working on that right now.
Excuse me. Any questions for Megan on 340B? Thank you. If you want to move on to the next one.
All right, the next one is for the Rural Emergency Hospital Act. There was a question about the reimbursement through insurance companies for these hospitals, and I was told by Kansas Hospital Association that the reimbursement rate for
Questions for Megan? Senator Petty?
So Megan went over several things there. One, we need to add the 100,000. No. Okay. What is that? Appropriate the fund for the hospitals, for the Rural Hospital Innovation Grant Program Fund? Right. I do. So we've appropriated the 10 million, but we didn't establish the fund. Correct. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd recommend that we put in whatever language is necessary to establish the fund. Otherwise, you can't have the private funds coming in because there wouldn't be any place for them to go.
Yes. Committee, everybody okay with establishing the fund? Okay, Amy? Okay. Thank you. Next, we have Office of the State Commissioner, Matthew. No, we've already addressed that one, so we don't need to worry about that one. State institutions and intellectual disabilities, Matthew Moore. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Matthew Moore. With regards to the state institutions for intellectual disability, the first item there was addition of funds to increase the starting salaries for direct support positions at the state institutions for intellectual disabilities. That's going to be K&I and Parsons, and so that request was originally to add funds to increase the starting salaries of their MHDD tech positions. Those are those individuals that work one-on-one with patients. The current salary was about a little over $12 an hour, and they were seeking to raise it to about $14 to help with retention issues.
So in the budget that was passed and the governor signed, we had raises for the IDD community, Is this the one with the bill that we haven't run across the floor yet, or is this in addition to all that?
So I think you might be thinking of the 5% increase for IDD providers on the HCBS waiver. So those are going to be individuals that provide maybe similar services in the community, whereas these are for staff at Parsons and KNI.
So this is Parsons and KNI.
Yes.
So Matthew, did we approve an amount?
You did not. This was a House item that had been moved to omnibus for consideration, and so it was more of an informational when we met.
It's information, okay. Any questions for Matthew? Okay, Matthew, if you want to proceed, please.
So the next item would be GBA number 3, item 14. It's going to be the energy bills related to the February cold weather event. And I believe that there was some information provided on Friday through email regarding the cold weather incidents. I know that this not only applies to the state hospitals, but other agencies as well regarding who provides those contracts.
Was there any questions for Matthew on the information that he mailed out on the cold weather event?
I believe that that information also came from Amy.
Pardon me? Oh, it came from Amy, okay. Any questions for Matthew? Seeing none? Thank you, Matthew. I think what we'll do is we'll wait. There's about 4 of these that are all energy. So we'll just address the payment on that all at once. Senator Solentrum.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to take a step back here. And again, I simply use this as a reminder to weigh in on this issue. In the items that we considered, the original omnibus changes, there's been a deletion of the amount of money going from, I think it was $35 to $100 for those that serve on the State Bank Board. Am I correct? Okay.
Right, that was a fee increase,
Right.
pay raise.
And so as we look at these, and as the discussion was here prior about, any pay or increase in compensation for those that are in other agencies, I would like to propose this to put an end to some of this stuff. Committee, are we overpaid on our daily compensation and per diem? I think we ought, in order to attract good people to these agencies to serve the state of Kansas, competent individuals who can make good decisions, good long-term decisions, I think we ought to compensate those individuals exactly the way we are compensated. I would hope that you would want a caliber of an individual equal to yourselves or greater to serve on these agencies and these committees as board members. So in the scheme of things, as we go through this, Governor Kelly, I think, said, oh, we ought to study this. I think it's a very simple solution to not have to go through a study. I think we should just pretty much mirror what we are getting compensated for our time that the state finds that, hey, this is what you're worth. Well, I think those individuals that we want to serve on these boards and commissions ought to get equal to what we get. So again, those are just my 2 cents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for Matthew? Okay, Matthew, I think you had another one.
That would be the state institutions for mental health. They're at the bottom of page 3. It was to review the fiscal impact of increasing starting salaries at Larned State Hospital to bring them in the same level as the correctional facility. This was, again, more of an informational item that the House took. It did make it into the bill and was subsequently vetoed, but it was just to review what that fiscal impact would be to raise those salaries.
Any questions on salaries at Larned? And seeing none, thank you, Matthew. You had one more, right?
And then that final item would just be another cold.
Oh, weather, okay. Thank you, Matthew. The next one we'll have is the Department of Corrections, Merle Riedel. And I guess here again, we've got two more energy bills, or one for you, I guess, right?
Yep, and then Aaron will follow me with the Adjutant General. I'm gonna experiment a little bit with the mic to see if we can fix some of the ringing. All right, can everybody hear me? We'll see, we'll see. All right, Mr. Chairman, I am looking Department of Corrections. My only item is related to GBA number 3, item 12, which was an energy bill related to the February cold weather event. So the agency is requesting $1.4 million to cover cold weather events. This event impacted, this involves both Ellsworth, El Dorado, Hutcherson, and Topeka correctional facilities. So together, that's a request for those facilities of $1.4 million. I can stand for any additional questions.
Any questions for Merle? Seeing none, thank you, Merle. Sorry, Senator Kershing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember a week or so ago, or before, they were talking about this loan program on all this cold weather and this damage and stuff. That they was going to, there was a possibility there'd be some CARES money or whatever you want to call it, or relief money to fill in some of that cost. What happens if that happens? What do we do with the loan that we've borrowed? Are they going to pay that back with that money so it's paid? Or does anybody know even?
Are you referencing, you're not referencing the PPP loan program, right? That's a federal program.
This is the weather. Whether there'd be some money from the federal government for weather related.
So I mean, that's a good question. Can some of the, essentially, I think the question is can some of the COVID federal relief funds be used for expenditures of this nature? And without guidance, that's somewhat difficult to determine. However, this, just a surface look, this would be a disaster that's different or a separate disaster. So there's the pandemic disaster itself, and then there is a cold weather disaster. So I wouldn't say that it's unlikely funds could be used for that purpose, but it does appear like those would be two different disasters.
Right, the cold one is a total thing on its own. We're talking about prices, possible price gouging, whatever they might find out down the road. So that.
So I'm not sure if there's loan programs available for this, if that could be used to offset costs for a state agency. I couldn't answer that at this point. Mr. Senator.
Any other questions for Merle? Thank you, Merle. The next one we have is the Adjutant General, Aaron Clausen. I think he's on WebEx maybe.
Thank you, Mr.
And it's
Chair.
also energy. You have the amount on that, Aaron?
The amount on that is $668,061, of which $179,519 is from the State General Fund.
Please repeat that. I missed it.
Sure, the total amount would be in fiscal year 2021 of $668,061, of which $179,519 is from the State General Fund.
Thank you. Any questions for Aaron? Okay, Aaron, if you want to do a KBI next.
Sure. KBI item I have is on the bottom of page 31 of the memo that you received. It's basically House Bill 2058. This is the Kansas Protection on Firearms Rights Act, and it was originally vetoed by the governor, but as due to today's action on the House and Senate floors, that veto was overridden. Basically, as part of the duties of the KBI would be required to report to the FBI of such expungement records that would be withdrawn from the National and Instant Criminal Background Check System. The KBI would also be required to keep records of such expungement within the person's criminal record history. for the purposes of documenting the restoration of such person's right to keep and bear arms. This bill, like I noted, was vetoed, but it has since been overridden. The agency is requesting $250,000, all from the state general fund, to contract with a vendor for updates to the criminal history repository, inclusive of these expungement responsibilities and related coding and software for fiscal year 2022.
Aaron, any questions on the 250,000? Everyone all right with paying this? Senator Clays?
I just want to point out that I'm always suspicious of really round numbers. And I would like to have someone take a look at this after it's implemented so we know exactly how much it actually costs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Everyone's in agreement to put the money in? Amy? Okay, next we will have Department of Transportation. Aaron?
All right, that is me again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the bottom of page 33 of the memo, you will see that the agency has 2 items of which questions were requested, and it was in relation to the Special City County Highway Fund disbursement of federal funds that were received. Now, staff within the room should have a copy of the Special City, County, and Highway Fund disbursement amounts that are going to each city and county for handing out. And then I've also included with that as well the disbursement that would go to the Equalization and Adjustment Fund if the committee was interested. So the committee essentially held off action on GBA number 3 out of 9, page 7, until this further detail was given.
Are there other questions for Aaron on the disbursements? I don't recall. Aaron, do you remember why we was wanting this information?
I believe it was Senator Solentrop who had requested further detail on the disbursements.
Okay. So there's no action required on this?
This is a GBA, so it would just require your adopting the GBA.
So committee, our basic question here is if we adopt this or we do not adopt it. It's whether we want to transfer these or not. Pardon me? Okay, everybody good? Okay. Amy, you got that? Okay. Next item, Aaron?
The next item I just have on there is information for you on GBA number 3, item 10, page 8, is the County Equalization Adjustment Fund distribution. This is additional money added by the governor in her recommendation, and this just allows for an off-cycle payment, which the committee already has taken action on, but I just included for additional detail or information.
Any questions on the additional information? Seeing none, Aaron, I guess you're next with the Kansas Highway Patrol.
The Highway Patrol is another cold weather event item, if you'd like further detail on that.
How much was that?
Let me find it here real quick. The Highway Patrol was 2021 expenditures of $44,835, which would be all from the state operations, or the Highway Patrol Operations Fund, which comes from the transfer from the State Highway Fund in 2021.
Questions on the cold weather for the Highway Patrol? Thank you, Aaron. Next item we'll have is University of Kansas Medical Center, Shirley Morrow. Welcome, Shirley.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. This item was the one that was Senator Thompson floor amendment, and you wanted some additional information. So I received an email from Senator Thompson stating that the Midwest Stem Cell Therapy Center has been working on a COVID vaccine using breakthrough technology with adult stem cells, and they would use these funds to advance their research and that they are ready for clinical trials. I also received an email from a Dr. David Prentice, and he is the one working on the Midwest Stem Cell Therapy and provided me with a proposal for what research they would be doing and what these clinical trials would be about. I also received an email from the representative at KU regarding this project, and it reads, after consulting with center leaders, it was determined that COVID-specific trials would be virtually impossible to conduct, and we respectfully decline this money. And I asked specifically KU who is making that decision, and I received an email from Dr. Samari, the Executive Vice Chancellor of KU Medical Center, and the director of the Midwest Stem Cell Center, and they both stated that we agree that the stem cell study for COVID would not be feasible at this time.
Okay, Shirley, I visited with Senator Thompson and was talking about the possibility of just putting that it would be available if they decided to use it. If they didn't, it would go back to if we were using COVID dollars, go back to the COVID fund. But I don't know, committee, with the additional information, if we even want to add language, or do you just want to? Oh. Well, if we put the language in there and they don't use it, we really haven't funded anything. And the point that the senator from Saline made was that, you know, this is one of the people that supports the budget. So I'm kind of inclined to think maybe we ought to add the language in to make sure we got our 21 votes. Anybody on the committee got any trouble with that? Senator Petty.
So I've heard repeatedly said by members of this committee that of things not being vetted in committee, not going through the process, and so being rejected. In fact, almost for the same amount of money, $500,000, or 500,000, wasn't that it? 500,000. And yet we have letters from the University of Kansas saying specifically that they're not doing this study, that they do not want the funds, that they're rejecting the funds. I see this being very irresponsible on our part when our charge is to make the best decisions for the state of Kansas and the best use of citizens' dollars. So yes, I would say, I mean, now, Mr. Chairman, you're saying, hey, let's just stick something in here because this will get 21 votes. I mean, that is really, I'm sorry, but that is very irresponsible.
I think what the senator said was that this guy voted for the budget, and this was something that they wanted added. If we add it and KU doesn't want to do it, which they said they don't want to do it, we're not spending any money, zero. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and I think, you know, the word you were looking for was hypocrisy when you were talking about the 500,000 for one thing, but not for another. But that being said, the dollars do lapse, and so either the money's there and they decide to use it, or the money's there and they decide not to use it, and then it goes back to where it came from. So really, it has no net impact. If they choose not to use it, it goes right back to the fund. Doesn't really matter. But when we're trying to cobble together 21 votes for something, and there's certain people on this committee who add lots of things to the budget, and then they don't vote for it, that's not helpful either. So I would be inclined to support keeping this in here for the folks who are on board with passing our budget, which is our only constitutional responsibility. And if you're looking for hypocrisy in this building, I mean, we could spend all day on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Saltrop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is Senator Thompson aware of the response?
I did mention it to him earlier today.
Okay, so he's aware.
Yeah, he is.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Hawk.
I love and I do actually really appreciate what we have to do to put a budget together to get it passed. I think the problem I've had with this, and it's sort of supported by what the Vice Chancellor had to say that was just reported to us. And I think I raised the question when we first looked at this here in Ways and Means, was we have a lot of multi-million, maybe billion-dollar drug companies developing vaccines. And I think there ought to be a lot of federal dollars that goes into it, because a singular vaccine, and we just heard, I sort of hate to say, here's $500,000, and if you can come up with something, go spend it, and if you can't, don't. When I'm not convinced that them doing this, I hate to sort of give them an incentive to say, well, let's go ahead and go down this path now, when they've said, we really can't do the clinical trials. Maybe we could think of something else that would be COVID related, and we'll take the 500,000, when I don't see it as a priority in the scope of things that we're looking at doing. I appreciate you wanting to keep a supporter in the fold, but this doesn't seem to me to be a smart way to do that. Now, I would hope there are a few other things in the budget. There certainly are a lot of things in the budget I like. And I would hope that the senator from Johnson would find at least one other thing in the budget that he could put his stamp on, other than this one that we're not getting a very good response from. So, thank you.
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're going to have this fight probably more than once, because the Midwest, well, and on other things, but the Midwest stem cell therapy deal, if I recall correctly, KU didn't want that either, and we actually had to write legislation that kind of forced that to happen. So all of these things that happen with it tend to be a little bit of a battle to push for the entity to do things that we would like them to do when it comes to the Midwest stem cell therapy. So again, I think, you know, if it were up to me, I'd probably put more teeth in it and force the issue. But if this is something where we can get it in there and maintain the votes on the budget, I'm all for it. And you'll probably hear me say it more than once before the end of this deal, because we are at 21 on the budget as it exists, and that's not an easy number to hit when individuals at this table aren't voting for the budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Petty.
Put education money in the budget, and maybe some people might look at the budget. When big things are missing, it's pretty hard to say you're going to vote for a budget. But that's not really the discussion here. I did hear a point mentioned about lapsing the funds. So I'm going to ask this question: what exactly does that mean when the lapsing, or could we actually put language in here that says the funds are lapsed? Say as of January 2022.
Senator Clays.
Yeah, it's my understanding that it happens at the end of the end of the budget year. Is that not accurate? If we do a lapse, it just occurs at the end of the budget year?
Shirley?
SGF accounts that have not been expended, if they don't have reappropriation language, they lapse.
We could add that language. I mean, it's what we're all talking about anyway. I mean, if that makes the committee more comfortable, we can put that in there that they don't do it, that it lapses.
I'm not comfortable with it all, but if lapsing funds, lapsing language would be better.
Any other comments? Senator Kirshen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kind of a strange discussion we're having here. As long as I've served on this committee, I never talked about that. Somebody vote for something, but I'm uncomfortable having that discussion. We either put the money in or don't. I'm not going to worry about who solicits somebody to vote for it because we put some money somewhere.
That is a good point, and I think we kind of gotten way off base here, so. Senator Hawk.
I think if we're taking bribes, I would really strongly consider voting for the budget if we put $4 billion in for K-12. Just making a point. I don't like trying to bribe people to vote for the budget, whether it be me or other good senators, and I understand the practicality of it, but this sort of goes a little too far for me. Thank you.
I think we've got off base, but Senator Claes.
There's a big difference between putting something in to get someone's vote and keeping something because an individual is supportive of the budget. Now, if someone were to say, and no one said to me, that they'll vote differently because of something, then that's different. But I would like to keep this in some form because we have a supporter of the budget who asked for this at some point in time. I have no idea if it would change his vote. None. So let's not go down the bribe road.
Senator Ergson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, we are off topic, but I'm going to go there because it's been mentioned several times about education funding. SB 175 had full education funding that was voted on before break. And so many people here voted no on that, the opportunity to fully fund education. So just want to remind the committee of that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other discussion? I guess after all the discussion we've had, we probably ought to just vote whether we want to put it in or not put it in. And I do think the suggestion of making sure that we put language in there that if it's not used, that it is lapsed back to whether we use CARES dollars or SGF. Senator Saltram.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You can also negotiate this at conference as well, if it's necessary.
Right.
Just giving you the option.
Shirley, does the House have this in there? They probably don't.
No.
So either we put it in or we don't. Senator McGinn. Okay. All right, everybody okay with that? We'll put it in and then put in the language that it would lapse if it's not used, which it looks like it's not going to be used. So, okay, next item, Shirley.
On the top of page 5, you have the Board of Regents. We did talk about the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act. Unfortunately, I forgot to ask the committee to also put in reappropriation language for the scholarship.
Is there an amount on that, Shirley?
No, reappropriation language just says if there's any unused money at the end of the fiscal year, it can be moved forward.
So we're not putting an amount on it, though.
It would be whatever amount would not be expended that year.
Okay, so is this just information again?
If you would allow, we would add the reappropriation language to the bill.
Everyone okay with that? Add the language?
The next item is a new item. One of the senators in the committee asked to discuss the cold weather events at the state universities.
These were not part of the governor's GBA.
Okay. Did you have some information?
I do. This table that's being handed out is actually a final table. There were some initial iterations due to the fact that they had to wait about a month to get some final bills in from some of the universities to come up with the final amount for the February cold weather incident.
Senator Solentrum.
Mr. Chairman, I guess, thank you, Shirley, for the information, but do we know to what extent of the $3 million is a result of the cold weather? In other words, what's her average bill, or what was the incremental increase based on the cold weather incident?
I don't know the exacts as far as what a normal February bill would have been. I was not provided that information. I was provided for K-State specifically that the 4 million was approximately 2 times their annual bill.
Okay, and that's perfect. That gives us some basis to go on. So it's roughly twice what it would have normally been.
But that's annual, not month. This is a monthly bill.
Okay.
And that was for 12 months.
Okay, now it's for 12, okay. All right, gives me some additional information, thank you.
Any other questions for Shirley? Senator Hawk.
Do we know, probably not, if ARPA money or our money can be used for this, or even this information we got late last week relative to maintenance of effort? If we pay this, does this, or allocate this, would this show more maintenance of effort?
I'd have to find that out.
I'm guessing that it would, because if we allocated this to the universities and we're roughly,
Technically operating.
depending on what figures are used, but one I've heard from the budget office is we're down $100 million on maintenance of effort. So this could be part, if we chose to do that, so we could keep the CARES funding in K-12, this could be something we could fund. Thank you.
Senator Petty.
Mr. Chairman, you had earlier said something about looking at these cold weather bills that we have from multiple agencies in a whole. And so I'm assuming that's not going to be today, but I'm just wondering if we could have, because these are, we've already gone past several of them now, and this is adding to that list. Would it be possible tomorrow or whenever you're planning our next meeting to have all of those cold weather bills to look at? And I think Senator Solentrop's question about, how this compares to last year, I'm not sure we even have that information for the other agencies, although the information like from K-State, 2 times the annual bills. I mean, we know that this is a major issue because we already addressed it with legislation for our cities and counties through that fund that was set up. So anyway, I'm just asking you, is that the plan, that maybe we could have all of these put together so that we can look at them?
I was thinking the ones, not the higher ed one here, but I think Senator Hawk made a really good point that if we can use this for maintenance efforts, it should be something we ought to look at. But the other, I guess I marked 5 on my sheet so far. I thought we would just go over them and see if the committee, can agree on funding them. Any other questions, Senator Hawk?
Just a point, relative to maintenance of effort, staff pointed out to me that we're okay on higher ed, I guess, in 21, but it's in 22 that we have our problem. So that just may affect where we put, if we pay off some of these. And I don't think that's a problem on the other agencies that submitted cold weather, but just this one on higher ed, a point of information.
Any other questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sitting here looking at these numbers, and I'm thinking about community colleges, private colleges. You know, where do you stop on something like this? And the other thing is, with some of these, surely they've got some balances, you know, of it's in unencumbered funds. It'd be interesting, that kind of thing. You know, we got to go help out. I'd be real interested if they had some money for rainy day money in their own balance sheets. So just a thought.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Hawk's question or statement brought up a question as well. So Shirley, on the Kansas Promise Scholarship Act, that's roughly about 10 million, I believe, could that be used for maintenance of effort?
Yes, I believe that's eligible.
Other questions for Shirley? Okay.
My last item that I will bring up is a reminder that during conference, there was a House position of $10 million that had language associated with it. That language included that the universities would go back to in-house classes that were pre-COVID in-house, and refunds that were given were to be given by monetary refunds, not credits. And the final decision on the conference committee was to take the Senate position, so that House item did not go through, and the House is looking at some type of monetary appropriation with some language included with it.
Okay, so that's just informational for us.
Correct.
Any questions for Shirley on that? Seeing none, thank you, Shirley. Next, we'll have the Department of Education, Norma Volkmer. Norma, we just wanted a little information because all the education is in the Education Committee. So I just thought if there was anything in particular here that we should be aware of.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. So I would just point to, there have been a few questions about the maintenance of effort. The Ivory memo that you received last week does, the last couple pages go into the maintenance of effort and the maintenance of equity. And I will note that it does include, I do note in the memo, what funds can be calculated when calculating the maintenance of effort. So that's for both K-12 and higher ed. So a lot of the questions have been what monies count towards those MOEs. The main three items that cannot be counted for higher education's MOE is the capital improvements, research and development, and then any tuition and fees paid by the student. But funding to scholarships provided by the state to assist students, we believe certainly could be included in the maintenance of effort calculation. And then for K-12, it's just the primary school finance formula, other categorical state aid, or the use of outside data sources. And so those are kind of how you calculate that MOE. So what exact funds in Kansas, you'd have to be submitted in the MOE, but that is the guideline for what can be calculated in that. And I can stand for any questions on that.
Thank you, Norma. Questions for Norma? Senator McGinn.
I guess I didn't read through this, but back to, I don't know if this is an appropriate time, but the maintenance of effort that we heard about just yesterday on higher education, never heard that before. I mean, when we were going through 2009, 10, 11, it was all about K-12. And I understand it's through this new money, but how can they just all of a sudden create maintenance of effort for higher education? Just curious if it really has been on the books all these years, or it just got created through the federal funding that just currently happened.
Certainly, so Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, so the maintenance of effort is part of the language in the CARES Act, KRISA, and ARPA. The language refers to a maintenance of effort for elementary and secondary education and higher education. So it's created within that just for the federal funding subject to the MOE, so it's not all of the federal money either. It's specific sections, which again are named in each of the individual bills. It's the money received under GEAR and ESSER, and so that is in the CARES Act, that's the ESSER fund that went to K-12, and then the GEAR money, which went to higher education in the state of Kansas. It's under KRISA, it's the ESSER again, and then the GEAR money that was provided to the governor, as well as the emergency assistance to non-public schools GEAR section, which has been awarded by KSDE. And then under ARPA, it is just the ESSER fund. So it is just the K-12 money, but the MOE is still elementary and secondary and higher education. So it's two separate tests that both need to be met for all of the money.
So we never had maintenance of effort until this latest federal money that came out.
I can't speak to other federal funds in the past. The COVID funding, certain pots of K-12 and higher ed money are subject to a maintenance of effort that's defined in the bill.
Other questions for Norma? Seeing none? Thank you, Norma. I'm going to have Shirley come back up for a little additional information she just was able to ascertain.
I was informed by the Board of Regents on the table that I provided you of the cold weather event. Those numbers are above and beyond the regular February payments. So those are the amounts that are above what a normal February payment would have been.
Thank you, Shirley. Any questions for Shirley before she sits down? Thank you, Shirley. Okay, committee, that gets us through our sheet. There was a couple of other additional pieces of Okay, committee, you need to go back to the cold weather events. We had 5 different items on there, and they're all GBAs, so we either have to approve or disapprove the GBAs. So, committee, what's the Senator Fagg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we look at those, on each one of those numbers, do they minus the actual?
Excuse me. Not the universities.
No, but the other ones.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, my question is, as we go back and look at them and the 250,000, the other numbers, is that allowing for what was actually on the budget or what their actual costs were? Or are they telling us that's our cost of 250? And then all of a sudden they've got money that's already been in there for their budget. So I'm just wondering if that's a gross or a net number on each one of those.
In your email from last week, it was primarily caused by an increase in rates rather than an increase in usage.
I just wanted the dollar figure, you know, like the 250. If their normal cost for utilities would be 30,000, is that been taken off the 250, or is that just going and saying, here's what our bill's going to be, you know, take care of us?
Let me call a few of these folks back in, and we'll see if they can answer that. So first one we have, number one, was the state institutions, Parsons and K&I, and that would be Matthew Moore. Matthew? Did you get the question from Senator Fagg? The mic, please.
Apologize. So their item number 14, my understanding was that they had originally anticipated $92,000 for their energy, but those bills came out to about a little over $1 million. And that the amounts that were in the GBA, so 141,000 for K&I, 441,000 for the Larned, 198,000 for Osawatomie, and 155,000 for Parsons, that those are all in addition to what they had originally budgeted for. So they originally budgeted for the 92, but then everything in the GBA is what they needed to above and beyond what they had originally budgeted for.
And the total GBA on that was?
It was 935,000.
935?
Yes.
Any other questions on this one? We want to do them all. Let's just go one at a time here. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, is that somewhere in this, is it somewhere in here? I couldn't quite find.
Going off of the actual governor's budget amendment memo. I think that would be on page 9.
Any other questions for Matthew? Seeing that, I guess if we want to just vote on if we want to pay these or not, I guess, do we have opposition to paying these? Senator McGinn.
Did the House work today? What did they do?
The House adopted the GBAs, but requested that federal funds be explored first. So they adopted and put the SGF, and then if there are federal funds available, they would lapse.
So we either agree with the GBA or disagree. So basically what we're doing. So I guess on the first one for Parsons, K&I, do we want to agree or disagree? Senator Hawkins agree. Anybody else? Senator Kirshen agrees. Senator Petty? Senator Erickson? You okay with it? And here again, I think we should put the same language the House has, that if we can use federal dollars first and foremost. Okay, you're good with that? Senator McGinn.
I just want to go back to the question we had. Is this everybody? I mean, I just wonder if we're going to find out next year that some other agency was like, oh, we should have asked for money. We're back to, I don't know if I got my question answered about could they have been on a regulated system or not?
In terms of that, I don't have any information on regulated systems. And then in terms of if there are any other, all I know is that for the state hospitals, this is what they reported. And these are what were included in the GBAs.
Senator Fag, are you okay with the GBAs as long as we look at federal funds first?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sitting here thinking the bill has to be paid. You know, what happens if we don't pay it? So it goes back to having the wording in there, and that's about all we can do.
Senator McGinn, you okay with it? Right. Senator Solentrum? You okay with the GBAs for cold weather, using federal funds first? Okay. Well, all four of them. There are 5 of them. There's, in addition to the hospitals, we've got Department of Corrections, we have the Mental Health Correctional Facility, we have the Adjutant General, and then we have the Highway Patrol. Senator Solentrum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as Senator Fagg asked, these are the overages.
Correct, Matt? Anyway, on the one you looked at, I'm
On the
gonna guess,
hospitals, yes.
Merle, yours are overages?
The same situation applies for the correctional facilities. So they anticipated the total expenditures for those 4 facilities of about 83,000. The bill came in at a little over 1.4 million. So what they're requesting here today is to cover the difference that they were charged because it wasn't really built into their budget for that for the month of February.
Thank you. Aaron, was yours all the same?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As my understanding is that the agencies that are mine under public safety are not held to the same kind of contract that under the Department of Administration would have. So the providers of those would involve rate increases. So this would cover that additional amount to cover the rate.
So it's the additional also. So they're all the same then. So is there anyone against paying these bills? As long as we look at federal dollars first? Okay? Amy, I guess we're good. Okay, now, a couple other things. Senator Clays.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have an item under the Attorney General Grants Program. It's the domestic abuse programs. It looks like during the allotments, 10% was taken off that and it wasn't put back in. I don't think any of us intended to take 10% from the domestic abuse programs in the Attorney General's office. So I would just ask that we add $52,000 to replace the dollars that were allotted.
Are there questions or discussion on Senator Petty?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this 52,000, this was a decision made by the Attorney General's office when they did their 10% allotment. They made that decision to take 52,000 from the domestic abuse program. I think that's it was an unfortunate decision and certainly needs to be put back.
Thank you. Is there anyone that doesn't think we should put the money back? Okay, we will we'll go ahead and add that, Amy. Also, committee, a couple other things. You want to hand them out? We had a couple of additional items today in for omnibus to consider. The Department of Commerce, Senate Bill 50 was passed. So Dylan, if you would give a little overview on this, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So Senate Bill 50 was not originally in the memorandum because it had been vetoed, but of course, after the veto override, the Department of Revenue did indicate that they are requesting $356,571 of state general fund for 6 FTE positions inside the Department of Revenue. The original estimate was about $753,000, but the indication from the Department of Revenue is that they can do some of the implementation costs on internal funds, but they are requesting additional funding for those FTE positions.
Questions for Dylan? Committee, it looks like this is another one that it's passed in this law, and so we need to make sure we fund and make sure we can implement the program. Is there anyone against funding this? Senator Hawk?
Is that Department of Revenue or Corrections, or Commerce?
Department of Revenue? I apologize,
okay.
we were doing this before the
I'm
meeting.
sure Commerce would love the money, but I think Revenue needs it.
Yeah, no, that is definitely Department of Revenue for the first one and Department of Commerce for the second one.
Gotcha.
Apologize for that.
Senator Petty?
So I just want,
Go ahead, no.
Dylan, it says that they requested $356,571, all SGF, and 6 positions. So are these 2 things, or this is funding those 6 positions?
That is the funding for those 6 positions. So you would be approving both if you did this. If you were to make that action, you'd add the funding and add the positions.
Senator McGinn?
I just want to be clear. So that top part is for the Department of Revenue?
That is correct. Senate Bill 50 is Department of Revenue.
Yeah, okay.
Everyone okay with that? Okay, Amy, we're good? Okay, Dylan?
And now moving to the Department of Commerce. There is Senate sub for House Bill 2074. That's the TEFI bill. This is simply the appropriation of the fund so that they can, it's already law through the TEFI bill, and this would simply add that fund to the Department of Commerce. It also adds $250,000. That's all special revenue funds, and that's the monies, that's an estimate of the monies that would be flowing through that TEFI fund. And so that's all fee funds.
And actually, we need to add the language in the next one also with this.
Right.
Do we need to do that separate, Amy, or? Dylan, on this commerce one, House Bill 2074, is there an FTE there also?
Yes, there is one FTE associated with that.
Any questions on House Bill 2074 and the Technology-Enabled Fiduciary Finance Institutions Act law? And then if you want to move on to the State Banking Commissioner, we'll just approve it all at once.
With your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Matt, and he'll take care of it for OSBC.
Thank you. Matt?
So for the Office of State Bank Commissioner, with regards to the TEFI bill, so the agency indicated that they would have additional expenditures to come up with certification and oversight for these new entities. So due to the fact that they have an appropriated special revenue fund, in HB 2007, they were appropriated X amount out of their fee fund. They were just requesting to raise that expenditure limit to allow for them to expend the monies that they would receive from assessments on the agents, on these technology-enabled fiduciary financial institutions, as well as an additional 3 FTEs to conduct that work. So for FY 2022, I think they had indicated about $786,000 that they would need, and then the additional 3 FTEs, and then for 23, just the $1 million that they anticipate receiving from assessing these entities to then raise their expenditure limit to allow them to expend those funds.
Questions for Matt? Seeing none, thank you, Matt. So committee, what we need to do, we need to approve the expenditure and the language. Everyone okay with that? The bill's done passed, and so, okay. Amy, we're all good? Okay, then Jill, did you have Yes, Jill, if you don't mind, please.
So the policy that you all adopted in House Bill 2007 was on nursing home rate reimbursements was increased, the daily reimbursement rate was increased to $15. And you all put in the budget $13.2 million to fund that. You went ahead and funded that from January 1st to April 30th. And then you wanted LCC to review the 4 million for, May 1st to June 30. Well, as we all know, the budget bill is not law yet, and that bill provided that LCC had to review and approve the increase for those 60 days starting May 1st, and so that's a legal nullity. That can't happen. So what this does is basically implements those provisions of House Bill 2007 as you requested it to be done, but just appropriates that 13.23 million to increase that $15 daily reimbursement rate from January 1st to June 30. So there's no, the money would be a wash. It's just fully implementing your policy.
Any questions for Jill? Senator Solentrup.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jill, does this apply to profit and nonprofit nursing homes? Every one of them?
I would actually ask Matthew if he knows the answer to that question. I believe well, I'm not going to answer it. He needs to. Thank you.
Matt, can you answer that, please?
Specifically as to whether or not it would apply to nonprofit or profit, I'm not entirely sure. I know that there are a number of nursing facilities that would receive Medicaid reimbursements, whether or not they're nonprofit versus profit. I don't know. I'd have to get some more information from the agency about that.
It's simply that if they're on Medicaid.
It would be, these are for the nursing facilities that would receive Medicaid reimbursement.
I might ask, thank you, Matt. I might ask Stephanie, do you know? Yes. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Katie. Been a long day.
Yes, it has. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Katie Wisman with Federico Durst Consulting Group. We represent the Kansas Healthcare Association, and I've also been working with Sean Miller, who represents Leading Age of Kansas. So those two associations do encompass both the profit and nonprofit. And to Matthew's point about the Medicaid reimbursements, those that are both profit or nonprofit that receive those reimbursements would be covered by this language.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Committee, is everyone okay with the language and fixing the little error we had earlier? Okay, Amy, I think we're good. I think with that committee, we've, JG, I guess you have some good news for us, if you don't mind.
Yes, we do have a little good news. We had our state general fund receipts. We finished the memo up this afternoon. And our receipts are $95.1 million above the estimates for this month/year. There were increases in individual and corporate income taxes of about $26 million in income and about $29 million in corporate. We're not sure about timing on these two receipts, as we have pushed the receipt date of all of the tax filings from April 15th to May 15th. So we're not sure of that. We're not sure when the $10,200 exclusion for the unemployment funding for each individual is included, or when the PPP are going to be expensed. So about $56 million of that is not, we're not very confident on. The 20 million in retail sales and the 13 million in compensating use are both pretty solid numbers at about $24 million, about $34 million. We'll have to say that March was the largest single monthly receipts that sales tax has ever brought in. It was around $236 million, and compensating use, again, was also one of the highest months that we've had in recent history. So, sales tax, compensating use, I'm not sure we can continue to project those highest months ever going forward. I believe we had a lot of stimulus money that was received in March. Historically, before that, most of the stimulus money had been put into savings, or a lot of it had been invested, so there wasn't a lot of that moving through the system. But now we really think that this really did move sales tax expenditures for the month.
Thank you, JG. And JG, the total amount, when did you guys do consensus revenue? Was that 3 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago? Okay, 2 weeks. So quite a surprise in 2 weeks.
Yeah, this came as a huge surprise when we were sitting down to look at the numbers.
Okay, you can bring us this kind of news anytime.
Yeah, I just want to let people know not to expect 91 million every 10 days.
Senator Erickson.
Thank you, JG, and thank you so much for the good news. It's nice to end on a positive note. I just have a quick question. I've seen reports that on March 30th, state revenue was projected to be 360 million lower than anticipated. And then on April 20th, that was revised to be 342 million above estimates. Have you seen those numbers? Can you explain that big shift?
In March, we were well above the estimates. So I'm not sure what number you're talking about as far as being below water.
I believe it came from the Department of Revenue, and I don't want to misspeak, but I've just seen those numbers, and I'll go back and source it and maybe get back to you.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
We'll be glad to work through any of that. It doesn't ring a bell that would be, unless it's talk about some of the projections, ending balances going forward prior to the consensus revenue estimates.
We'll just take the good news and be happy. Okay, thank you, JG.
Other questions for JG? Seeing none, thank you, appreciate it. I think the only other item we had that we wanted to talk about with the committee is some possible language for the remodel of the docking building. And I'm going to let Senator Clays kind of give you an idea on what. Oh, I don't either. Do you have some, Jill? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I can explain while you hand that out. So this proposed language is a result of the Joint Committee on State Building Construction's meetings really over the course of several years, talking about what to do with the docking state office building. And then also it includes language regarding the new labs for the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. The first section there, Section A, deals with the docking state office building and essentially says that we'll bond to we will bond to reconstruct that building as it stands, all of the floors, to renovate that. It then goes into Section B, which discusses the, the laboratories. And this one's a little more complicated because it does request that the Department of Administration issue an RFP whereby communities can come together and put together a proposal for what they would do with a KDHE laboratory in their community. There's been some interest expressed by a couple of universities already regarding that, and that RFP would allow individuals or communities to propose their input, whether it be land or for maybe Topeka, they would throw in on a parking garage or something to that effect to have that building in their community. That process then is also spelled out there, and we discussed this sort of briefly in committee. But what would happen is it would, those proposals would come back to the Joint Committee on State Building Construction. They would be reviewed, and then a recommendation would be made to the State Finance Council concerning that project so that it could be approved through them over the summer and not delay that project anymore. It would also require that these items be wrapped together into a single, what do you call it, resolution of the State Finance Council. So that is kind of a, oh, and it also requests that coronavirus relief funds be used if eligible. It looks like through the CARES Act and others, there might be some opportunity for the KDHE lab to have some federal funding involved as a portion of that. The blanks that you'll notice on there, there is one in Section A and one in Section B is the bond cap. So the project not exceeding a certain amount of money. We do not have the numbers on that. So prior to making a guess, we're going to leave that blank and address it in conference, if that's acceptable to everyone.
So we'll have Senator Clays answer any questions, but my suggestion is that we have a short meeting tomorrow at some point in time, so everyone has an opportunity to read this and kind of look it over and make sure we're all comfortable with it, and then we can have, even if it's at the rail, if it's, you know, to accept the language, because we got everything else done, so I think everybody can look at this overnight, and I know there's people are wanting to go to a dinner. So, Senator Petty.
I won't prolong this, and I thank you for the opportunity to look at this. I'm just want to clarify, we went real quickly over the 340B program. We didn't do anything, so we're not doing anything. It had to do with language in the budget concerning the 340B program, but it's
Senator McGinn.
I asked about that when we were here earlier, last week. And it sounded to me like, in talking to the people from the Hospital Association, that they're working it on the House side. And I mean, I was open to helping, and they said, we're doing it on the House side. So that's where they're comfortable at.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Senator Clays? Okay. Well, committee, then we'll plan on a short meeting at some point tomorrow and discuss this after you've had an opportunity to look at it. So